Hi, I'm Ken Williams. Welcome to my blog. This is an introductory video to talk about who I am, talk about my boating experience, and talk about what we're going to talk about on this channel. And and also I'm going to present our new boat. Roberta and I have been boating basically all our lives, and and we have a new boat, and this particular video blog is going to be about the new boat and all the exciting places we're going to go with it. And I'm hoping that you'll subscribe to the channel, and I'll explain what it's going to be and what we're going to talk about. Anyway, it's kind of a catch-up too, as the first video on the channel, to recount where we came from and why we're into boating, and why I think this will be interesting to you. But to start at the beginning, Roberta and I have now been married for over 50 years. And basically, we built a company together, starting it from scratch, doing video games. And it started with just us, and over an almost 20-year period, we built it to a 1,000-employee company, producing hundreds of hit games. And at one time, we were pretty dominant in the video game industry. We sold the company. It's currently owned by Microsoft, and retired in 1996. And when we retired, we were kind of locked out of doing anything because of a non-compete clause. And so we said, well, what do we want to do with our lives? And we had always been boaters, starting with ski boats when our kids were young, to graduating to bigger and bigger boats. And at the time the company sold, we were living in Seattle. And Seattle is kind of a great place to own a boat because there's beautiful islands, and you can run all the way up to Alaska, although we didn't do that. Most of our cruising was within I'd say a 100-mile radius, running from Seattle up to an area called Desolation Sound. And but we would spend, while we were working, we'd spend weekends on the boat. But with the company sold, we were suddenly able to spend weeks and even months on the boat. And we'd go up, drop anchor, and have a good time until once we hit really rough seas. And I was worried we'd sink the boat. I got in over my head, and that sent a pretty clear message that we needed a more seaworthy boat. And so we went to a boat show in Seattle, and encountered a brand of boat we had never heard of called Nordhaven. There was a salesman on a Nordhaven boat, and he suddenly started talking about their focus being couples like Roberta and I, who wanted to cross oceans. And Roberta and I had no interest in crossing oceans, and I couldn't even imagine such a thing. But he was talking about a couple named Jim and Susie Sink, who had taken a little 46-foot boat and taken it all the way around the world. That sounded pretty amazing. I mean, I figured any boat that could cross the Pacific could certainly find its way around the 100-mile radius that we were cruising in. And so I talked to him, and I actually went and interviewed Jim and Susie Sink. And they got me excited about getting a Nordhaven boat. And so we talked to Nordhaven, and they happened to have a boat that Prince Rainier of Monaco had commissioned. And I'm kind of a fan of France, and we vacationed there a lot. And even just the concept of having a boat that he had personally spec'd out sounded fun, so we bought it. We bought the Nordhaven 62. And it really was a wonderful boat and extremely seaworthy. And we cruised it around the Pacific Northwest for a while. And then I had the fun idea of what if we were to load the boat on a freighter and ship it all the way to France. And we did that. We hired a delivery crew who got it to Florida, and then it loaded on a freighter and then went to France, where we cruised the south of France within about a 50-60 mile radius for years until 2004. And yeah, all this is making me feel old, although we're not that old. Roberta and I were married at 18, and so we were able to be retired by 40. I mean, that's kind of an unusual thing, and was part of I think probably what made our blog fun. I've been blogging forever, but to make a long story short, in 2004, our boat was already in France when Nordhavn announced a publicity stunt. They were going to take a bunch of boats across the Atlantic and travel in a pack of boats and have along doctors and engineers and Nordhavn's management and try to create a rally or a kind of a big event around Nordhavn boats. And we were already there. But that sounded fun, so we loaded our boat on a freighter, shipped it to Florida, and then drove back to our own boat slip in France as part of the team with Nordhavn. They had 18 boats, including ours, that crossed the Atlantic, and we did crazy stuff like stopping in the middle of the Atlantic for a swim. And it was a great trip and kind of addicted us to the idea of long-range cruising. So back in France, we had fun, but we decided that the boat that we had, our Nordhavn 62, had been spec'd, like I said, by Prince Renier, and we wanted to do a boat that was exactly what we wanted. So we talked to Nordhavn about designing a new boat just for us that became the Nordhavn 68, and Roberta pretty much defined the boat, which has gone on to be a huge success for them. And we bought one and started cruising. And actually, because we were buying a new boat, we took delivery on the west coast of the United States and used that boat to do most of our world cruising. And as I'm recording this, we've cruised around 60,000 miles. But we took that boat all the way up to Seattle, then down to Costa Rica, then back to Seattle, cruising through Mexico and, well, I don't know, El Salvador and Nicaragua and all kinds of crazy places. But then in 2009, us and two other Nordhavn boats had the idea. One of the other two boats, the husband, Brian Jones, kind of had this concept that you could get to Japan without having to cross the Pacific, that you could go north through Alaska, across the Aleutian Islands, into Siberia and wind up in Japan. And I thought that was a crazy idea, but the three wives loved it and started lobbying us, and ultimately we did it. We called it the Great Siberian Sushi Run, and I don't think we had the vaguest idea what we were going to do after we got to Japan, but we did it. So we headed out, and I remember thinking there was no way that we were actually going to get there. I didn't know what was going to happen, but we were going to go. And we did it. We did the cruise. We had a wonderful time. And once we got there, we just kept going. We spent, well, and I should talk a little about our style of cruising. Roberta and I tend to divide our time such that we're 3 to 6 months on the boat and take the boat somewhere, leave it during an off season, return to our lives on land, and let the boat get fixed up, and then we return to the boat and we do more cruising. So we're about half of our lives, or a third to a half of our lives on the boat, and we do everything we do with our dogs. And our dogs create a little bit, both good and bad. There's parts of the world we can't cruise in because of the dogs, and part of the challenge of cruising for us is to figure out where we can't go, and Roberta spends a lot of her time just figuring out how to get the darn dogs into different countries. But it is also special. Once you get the dogs into the country, you suddenly feel like locals. when people encounter us and they see the dogs, they automatically assume that we're locals or living there. And because we tend to be in countries for 3 or 4 months at a time, we've cruised through 27 countries now. Yeah, they consider us locals. But we after Japan, we went on to Taiwan and then into Hong Kong, and then we were a little nervous about the Indian Ocean, and there was a lot of pirate attacks at that time, and there was even a killing of a sailboater by the pirates. So we decided to load the boat on a freighter and ship it to Turkey, where we cruised for a while, and then we just kept going. So we've done a lot of cruising, but and returned the boat to the U.S., at which point we thought we would sell the boat and downsize, because as you can see looking at me, I just turned 70, and the Nordhavn 68 is a great boat, but it's also a big boat and was a lot to take care of. So we thought maybe we'd downsize and do some a different kind of cruising. So we talked about doing the Great Loop, which is a cruise that you go up the east coast of the United States. There's some passages that'll take you into the Great Lakes and down through the Mississippi, and that sounded like a lot of fun. And so we bought a boat that was almost custom made for doing that, the Grand Banks 60, because it's real short and could go through the bridges that you'd encounter on the loop, and it's fast, kind of a carbon fiber go fast boat. And that sounded fun, and we were going to do it, but then COVID hit. And for those of you that lived through COVID, our travel was limited. There was no way that we could really make that trip happen. And so we decided we'd just keep the boat in Seattle and cruise the local Pacific Northwest. But even that was handicapped. They closed the Canadian border. So we still spent time on the boat, spending 3 or 4 months, and used that time to build a video game called Colossal Cave. And we hadn't built a game in 20 years, but I decided to write a book about Sierra Online, our old company, and do one more video game, and that kept us busy. But we were doing it on the boat, and both Roberta and I are very computer-centric, and she had her computer, I had mine, and we decided that a small boat just wasn't working for us. And we talked about going back to our Nordhavn 68 and ocean crossing again, because we love that. But we realized that the same problem we had before. It's a big boat and takes a lot to take care of. Then we started talking about, well, what if we were to get a boat that was big enough to have crew? We're private people, and we couldn't see coexisting on a boat with crew. But we said, well, what if we got a boat big enough that they could have their own quarters, their own galley, their own head, their own stateroom, their own entrance, and then maybe we could do crew. And so we started looking for a boat that was big enough to give us the space of our Nordhavn 68, but also have a crew, and had the seaworthiness and range to be able to cross oceans and take us around the world again. And so we did that search. We had a long laundry list of what we were looking for. And we first looked at new boats that met that criteria. And as you can imagine, that would be a very expensive boat. And as we started looking at it, we thought maybe we could sell some things and stretch and save pennies in a jar or whatever it is. But we kind of convinced ourselves that maybe we could afford a boat, but we couldn't afford the time. Any new boat we looked at would be 3 or 4 years in construction. And I'm eager to get back out there cruising again. So we started looking at used boats. And we said, what if we could buy a boat for like a third the price of a new boat, get it immediately, and then invest a few dollars in fixing it up to be exactly what we want. And we got, we started looking around the world, and we found a boat in Sweden that was close to meeting all of our criteria. And we thought with maybe, 2 or 3 months in a shipyard, it could be perfect. And so we bought the boat, we shipped it to the U.S., and it took, I think almost 3 months on a freighter to get here to Seattle, where I'm recording this. And we put it in a shipyard here to start the work. And we made a long laundry list, and the list grew. The list grew. We suddenly, Roberta wanted a new interior. We wanted different navigation electronics. We wanted everything: new carpets, new countertops, new electronics, new electrical system. Basically, we're going to create a new boat, and all of that work is taking longer than I thought. As I'm recording this, the boat's been in the shipyard for a couple of months, and it's probably going to be there for another 3 or 4 months. And short term, my blog's entries are going to be very mechanical in nature. I'm going to talk about the different decisions we're making and have made as we upgrade the boat. And hopefully that'll be of interest to people. But once we start cruising, then we're going to go interesting places. That's the one thing I can commit to, is that we don't do boring places. We'll, first up for us is Hawaii. We've already reserved a slip there. And as soon as we get out of the shipyard, we'll be taking the boat down the coast and across to Hawaii. And after that, I don't know if we're going to go east. I don't know. We've been watching a series of YouTube videos from another sailboat that went through the Northwest Passage, and then a sister boat of the boat we acquired, the same model, went through the Northwest Passage. So that's also, so we don't know if we're going east, south, west, north. That's the beauty of having a boat that can go anywhere. All we know is we don't want to be boring. We want to do fun things, and hopefully, some of that appeals to you. Especially if you're ever thinking you might retire and get a boat, be it a power boat or a sailboat. I would think you'd learn a lot out of our videos. I do try to make each one educational in some way, and I should say that I don't do sponsors. I do the blog just kind of for fun, because I'm a computer guy and I like to fiddle with my computer. But and I like boats, so and I like to share the knowledge we've got. So the blog entries will be semi-educational, and we'll go interesting places and meet interesting people. So if any of that appeals, please subscribe. And that's it for this introductory video. Thank you.